friends, it's RSKT, and welcome back to another episode of the AE Modular Video Library, the series that takes a look at the wide range of modules available for the AE Modular system. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the VCO or Voltage Controlled Oscillator module. We'll be giving a general overview before diving into some demo patches towards the end. Before we begin, AE Modular is a small but ever-growing system, so if you find this video useful, be sure to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already, or consider supporting me on Patreon. The videos for this series can be found in a playlist on my channel and can be viewed in any order. Green thumbnails are used for official Tangible Waves modules, and pink thumbnails are used to cover third-party modules. With that said, let's now take a look at VCO. Now, before we hear any of the sounds that can come out of this thing, let's just quickly have a look at some of the inputs and outputs. We've got two CV inputs for pitch modulation. We've also got a modulation input so that we can plug things like LFOs and whatnot into it. We've got a pulse width modulation and a sync control, as well as bus CV. In terms of outputs, we've got two sawtooth waves, two triangle waves, and two square waves. So I'm just going to hook up my mixer here to audio output. And let's just have a quick listen to what some of these sound like. So here's the sawtooth wave. And just quickly covering some of the controls here, we've got coarse frequency and fine frequency. So coarse. Or we can do finer increments with the fine knob. Let's have a listen to the triangle wave. Now this one's particularly quiet. It does say on the manual that you might want to plug something like this into a signal amp, for example, but I don't have one of those. And then we've got a square wave, which is, particularly loud. Now with the square wave, we can get wide range of good sounds, but we've also got a pulse width control. Now if we push it too far, it'll cut out completely, so there is a sweet spot. One thing I might quickly point out is that all of this is analog. We do have another analog oscillator over here, a couple in there, but it's important to keep in mind that this one's kind of digitally tracked so that it will maintain pitch more often than not. Whereas this one, being analog, it will drift over time, depending on heat, depending on a lot of different factors. So there's been a few times that I've been jamming around with something on my Deluge and my AE Modular system. Everything's in tune and sounding great. I'll go away, make a cup of coffee or have lunch or something, come back, and I have to retune that oscillator. So just keep that in mind when you're working with this thing. Personally, 9 times out of 10, I think it sounds really cool when things fall slightly out of tune. It gives that sort of old school feel. But yeah, you might want to reach for more sort of digitally calibrated oscillators if you're looking for perfect pitch tracking. So let's have a look at some of the CV and modulation inputs. Just for now, I'm just going to take the RBSS over here. That's got its sort of own clock going on there, and I'm just going to tighten the range of notes with an attenuator. So just keep in mind the RBSS is kind of like the answer to Eurorack's Turing machine. I'm going to plug this into the analog input, and let's just use the same clock source to trigger our quantizer as well. We don't need to do it that way, but I just find you get kind of cleaner results doing it. We'll take this output and plug it into the CV input at the top here. Let's have a listen. Great. Just so that this sounds a little bit nicer, I'm just going to hook this up to a wasp filter, just so that I can filter the sound a little bit. Great. I mean, I can open it up if I need it, but it's just there to sort of stop things getting boring. Now, something else that we could do here is, for example, I've got a sloped or kind of sawtooth wave LFO moving here. What I might do is take that and let's just plug it into the second CV input. So that's already pretty neat because it means that we can have two different pitch sources coming into this thing and doing all sorts of really cool and crazy stuff. Now, that's a pretty crude example, but one thing that you might want to experiment with when doing this is by taking something like the sequence 8 over here. If I were to clock this with Euclid Grid, and this isn't going to be a perfect example because normally I'd spend a bit more time getting clocks and things set up, but either way, we'll just put this down to maybe 1 step and press clock, and we can see that this is moving along quite slowly. So if we take that and use the CV and have a listen. Sorry, the raw output. So it's just a way of keeping your pattern there, but still having different ranges for your pattern to move through so things don't continue to stay stagnant. I know that this doesn't sound really nice to the ear or anything like that, but if you were to sort of set up the pitches just the way that you want them, you could have a much less boring track playing as you move throughout. So I'm just going to unplug those sources for now and just make sure everything's back to normal. Great. So something else that we can experiment with is, for example, we'll take this triangle wave down here and let's plug it into the mod input. So we can hear right now that this is affecting the frequency, and that's because there's a little switch here that has frequency or pulse width modulation. So let's just speed this up a bit. Maybe we'll switch it to a triangle wave. So we can increase that depth, or we can decrease it, just like an attenuator. And as you can hear, this can be a really interesting way to get vibrato. Let's speed this up. If we were to switch this to pulse width, and slow this down some. And we get that cool moving pulse width sound. Sounds fantastic. Now, not only that, but we also actually have a pulse width input down the bottom here. So we could take something else, maybe a square wave, for example. I don't know how this is going to sound, but let's plug it into pulse width. That's pretty cool. We could even take something like the RBSS that we had going before. Or maybe we could take a stepped LFO from the Castle. Obviously, you might want to attenuate this first before sending it in there because we're hearing that it's cutting out a little bit. And then finally, we've also got a sync input for syncing it with other oscillators and getting that really cool sync sound. So let's turn this up and let's just take something else, maybe a sawtooth wave. Yeah, that sounds cool. Nice and heavy. We could even try other things like maybe a triangle wave. A sine wave. Or maybe another square wave. So yeah, lots and lots of different things that you can do with this single oscillator. And then when combining it with other oscillators and different modulation sources, you can really shape it into what you want it to sound like. Other than that, I don't really think that there's more that I have to say with this module other than, it's an obvious staple. You might notice in a lot of my other videos that I've actually got it sitting out of the rack so that I could plug Le Module in. And that's purely because, as great as it is to have all those fun features and whatnot, I just didn't find myself using them for a lot of the patches that I was making. I do plan to get a second rack someday and have it back in the system and then sort of firing on all cylinders. But for now, I hope that you enjoyed the demo patches I've got prepared for you that I'm going to play in a second. Hit the like if you like, and if you don't, tell me why. Please subscribe, check me out on Patreon, and thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.